Most people are taught that self-care means making life easier, more comfortable, less stressful, less uncomfortable. But what if that very advice is quietly making you weaker? The ancient Stoics believed something completely different. They believed that true self-care does not shield you from hardship. It prepares you to face it. And that difference changes everything. When you pass the age of 30, 40, or beyond, you may have already realized an uncomfortable truth: life does not get easier. Responsibilities increase, loss becomes real, pressure turns into a constant presence. Yet modern self-care culture keeps offering the same advice: sleep more. Avoid stress. Follow your feelings. The Stoics would strongly disagree. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who lived through war, plague, and constant political betrayal, did not write about self-care to feel better. He wrote to remain steady in the middle of chaos. In this video, you will learn how the Stoics understood self-love at a much deeper level, not to feel happy for a moment, but to stay strong for a lifetime. We will break this down into 3 core Stoic principles, along with practical habits you can apply immediately. Fan 1, you may have experienced this before. You wake up on an ordinary morning, nothing special has happened, but in your mind something feels heavy. An unanswered email. A conversation from yesterday that still lingers. A vague sense that you are falling behind. There is no obvious disaster, yet your mind feels restless. And you wonder, why do I always feel tired, even when life on the outside seems fine? The Stoics believe that much of the exhaustion in life does not come from circumstances, but from how we carry those circumstances in our minds. When you pass the age of 30, you are no longer broken by major tragedies like you were when younger. What wears you down are smaller things: prolonged worry, repetitive thinking, and a quiet sense of losing control. This is where Stoic self-care begins, not in the body, not in the environment, but in the mind. The Stoics taught that there are 2 kinds of things in life: things you can control and things you cannot. It sounds simple, but very few people truly live by this principle. You cannot control what others think of you, you cannot control the economy, aging, or what has already happened. But you can always control how you interpret events, how you respond, and what you do next. Epictetus once said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Imagine a very familiar example. You lose your job. Or you are passed over for a promotion. The event is real. It hurts. And no one denies that. But immediately afterward, your mind starts telling its own story: I failed. I am not good enough. This is the end. At that moment, you are no longer reacting to the event itself, you are reacting to the story in your mind. This is where the Stoic would pause. They would not rush to act, they would observe. They would ask, is this truly within my control? Is this fear information, or is it a command? That moment of pause is a profound act of self-care. Stoic self-care is not about eliminating emotions. It is about not letting emotions drive your life. Anger comes and goes, anxiety appears and disappears. But if you act while they are in control, you will live with the consequences for a long time. You may have sent an email while angry, said something you could not take back. Or made a decision just to soothe a temporary feeling. The Stoics were not immune to this, they simply trained themselves to not rush. Marcus Aurelius wrote those journal entries not for the world, but for himself, to remind himself that the mind can be a refuge, or a battlefield. When you learn to observe your thoughts, you realize something important: not every thought is trustworthy. And that realization is freeing. You do not need to believe everything that appears in your mind, you only need to recognize that it is there. Earlier, we said that Stoic self-care is not about making life more comfortable, but about making you strong enough for life. This section is the foundation of that idea. When you master your mind, you are no longer swept away by every small event, you begin to slow down, not out of weakness, but because you are choosing to respond consciously. In the next part, we will go further. Because mastering the mind alone is not enough, the Stoics understood that a resilient mind needs a disciplined body to support it. And that is where self-care moves from thought into daily action. Fan 2, after you begin to master your mind, you will realize an uncomfortable truth. No matter how clear your thinking is, if your body is exhausted, weak, undisciplined, your mind will eventually follow. The Stoics understood this clearly. They did not separate mind and body, they saw the body as the foundation, and a weak foundation cannot support a strong spirit. You may have experienced this. You wake up after a night of poor sleep, you skip breakfast or eat in a rush, you sit in front of a screen all day, no movement, no real rest. And then you wonder, why am I so irritable, why do I have so little patience now? The problem is not that you are mentally weak, the problem is that you are demanding too much from a body that is not being properly cared for. But here, Stoicism is not about indulgence. It does not say, listen to whatever your body wants. It says, train your body so it can serve your purpose. That is a crucial difference. The Stoics lived simply, they ate enough, not to escape emotions, they exercised regularly, not to show off, but to stay mentally sharp, they kept a clear daily rhythm, because outer chaos often begins with inner chaos. Stoic self-care is not about feeling good right now. It is about choosing what benefits you in the long run. And sometimes, that choice is not comfortable at all. The Stoics deliberately invited difficulty into their lives. It sounds strange, but think about it. When you willingly do hard things, wake up earlier, train when you lack motivation, eat simply when you could easily indulge, you are telling yourself, I can endure this. And that belief quietly accumulates. You may not notice it immediately, but one day, when life truly tests you, illness, loss, financial pressure, family responsibility, you do not panic the way you used to. Not because you were born strong, but because you are used to not running from discomfort. The Stoics called this voluntary discomfort, choosing inconvenience on purpose. Not to punish yourself, but to train endurance. Imagine two men in their 40s. One always avoids discomfort. If he is tired, he rests. If he is bored, he quits. If he does not feel like it, he does not do it. The other is not extreme, but disciplined. He still rests, but does not let emotions decide everything. He does what needs to be done, even when he does not enjoy it. When adversity strikes, who stands stronger? Stoicism does not oppose comfort. It simply refuses to let comfort control life. There is a simple but profound idea: a life that is too easy creates a fragile person. Stoic self-care accepts that growth always comes with a certain level of discomfort. And when you are no longer afraid of that discomfort, you become far freer. In the first part, we talked about creating distance between emotion and action. This part is the next step. Discipline of the body helps you maintain that distance longer, deeper, and more sustainably. When you are exhausted, you react impulsively. When you lack discipline, you give up more easily. But when your body is trained consistently, your mind has something to lean on. The Stoics were not seeking a perfect body, they sought a body strong enough not to betray the mind when it matters most. And when you have a clear mind and a disciplined body, you begin to see life differently. Less afraid of loss, less attached. Because you understand that not everything is within your control. In the next part, we will reach the deepest layer of Stoic self-care, preparing for loss, change, and the inevitable. Not to live in anxiety, but so that when it happens, you do not collapse. Fan 3. When you have learned to master your mind and train your body through discipline, a big question begins to appear. If I have done everything I can bad things still happen? The Stoics answer very directly, yes. Life does not promise fairness, there is no contract guaranteeing that your effort will always be rewarded or that the people you love will always stay. And precisely because they accept this truth, the Stoics are truly free. They do not practice self-care by hoping that everything will go smoothly, they practice self-care by mentally preparing for what does not go smoothly. It may sound heavy, but in reality, it is the opposite. You may have seen this before. Someone who has never considered loss, when loss finally comes, collapses completely. Not because they loved more, but because they were never prepared. The Stoics called this practice premeditatio malorum, reflecting in advance on what could go wrong. Not to live in anxiety, but to live with awareness. You spend a few minutes each day reminding yourself that what you have today may not be there tomorrow. Your job, your health, your relationships, even yourself. When you truly accept this, something strange happens. You cling less tightly, and because of that, you appreciate more deeply. The Stoics do not love less, they love correctly. They do not place their entire sense of peace in things that can disappear. Imagine a man in his 40s. He has a family, a career, habits built over a lifetime. He knows that one day, everything could change. Not because he is pessimistic, but because he is mature. When hardship arrives, illness, divorce, the loss of a loved one, or simply the realization that he is no longer young, feels pain. But he does not fall apart. Because his identity is not built entirely on external roles. This is where the next Stoic practice appears, living by values, not by mood. The Stoics believe that there is only one thing that is truly good and lasting: virtue. Not money, not status, not recognition. But how you behave when no one is watching. When you live by values: integrity, courage, self-control, fairness. You are not easily shaken by external changes. You may lose many things, but you do not lose yourself. And then, after accepting loss, after living by values, the Stoic reaches the highest level of self-care. They call it a more fatigue love of fate. Not loving it because it is comfortable, but loving it because it is unavoidable. Amor fati does not mean surrender. It means actively cooperating with reality. Instead of resisting life, you learn to ask, what is this trying to train me for? When you see hardship this way, it is no longer an enemy. It becomes a teacher. And here, self-care is no longer a checklist of habits. It becomes a way of life. You no longer need to control everything, you do not need to always be right, you do not need to run from pain. You only need to stand firmly in your role as a person of dignity. In the first part, we began with the mind. In the second part, we built the foundation through physical discipline. And in this part, we learned how to face the inevitable. That is the entire journey of Stoic self-care. Not to live more easily, but to live more fully. Not to avoid suffering, but to avoid being destroyed by it. And when you reach this point, you realize that being unbreakable does not mean never falling. It means that no matter what life takes away, it cannot take away the person you have become. Fan Ket, if you look back at the entire journey we've just gone through, you will realize that self-care in Stoic philosophy is not gentle in the way many people imagine. It does not begin with escaping pressure. It begins with facing yourself. The Stoics love themselves by learning to master the mind, clearly distinguishing what they can control from what they cannot. They observe emotions without letting emotions take control, understanding that not every thought that appears in the mind deserves to be trusted or acted upon. They continue to love themselves by training discipline in the body. They do not indulge laziness, they do not live for short-term pleasure, they willingly accept small difficulties each day, because they understand that those who are familiar with discomfort do not collapse when life becomes harsh. And finally, they love themselves at the deepest level by mentally preparing for loss, living by values rather than moods, and learning to embrace even what goes against their wishes. These 7 habits do not make life easier, but they make you stronger. Being unbreakable does not mean never feeling pain. It does not mean never falling. Being unbreakable means that no matter what life takes from you, it cannot take away your dignity, self-mastery, and inner strength. If this video resonated with you, do not try to remember everything, just choose one of the 7 habits we discussed and practice it for 7 consecutive days. Not to show off, not to prove anything to anyone, just to keep a promise to yourself. If you are at an age where life no longer allows you to live impulsively, if you want to be calmer under pressure and steadier in the face of change, subscribe to the channel. This is a place for people who are not seeking short-term comfort, but long-lasting strength over time. And if you want to continue this journey, I suggest watching the next video, Why Stoics Do Not Chase Happiness and What They Choose Instead. That video will help you understand why true peace does not come from having more, but from needing less and mastering more. Thank you for staying until the end. I'll see you in the next journey.